Chapter 4462. Yes. Pu Jian Wushuang, Lingyu, Ram, Bingyu Supreme etc. all have their pupils narrowed. As the of the universe said, the crisis in the virtual universe is pervading. Once the four of them are exposed, the entire universe will be bombarded. Don't say it's the four of them. Even if they are invincible, they will never be alive. Well, let it go. I'll send the treasure that can be hidden later to your palace. Wu Zhou said. Afterwards everyone disappeared. When Sun walked out of the hall, Bingyu Supreme turned his head and smiled at Jian Wushuang Mori. The meaning of the threat is beyond words. Jian Wushuang ignored him, but walked out side by side with the 9 kings and overlords. Leader, when you go, I'm afraid that Bingyu is not at ease. Overlord said, a little worried. In this universe, we are not afraid of him, but once we go to the virtual universe, no one knows what's going on. In case that guy holds the same thoughts and fights with you in the virtual universe, to the breath will be exposed. Wu Jinshuang could not help but smile and heard his words, looked at him, shook his head and replied. Relax, he dare not. Don't dare? Lord, what does this mean? Overlord heard a word. Wu Jinshuang did not answer, but the next king of the 9 robbers sneered back. Because he is afraid of death. The king of tyrants looked at Jian Wushuang and Jiu Jiawang, who looked at each other with a smile, and couldn't help it. Well, don't worry. Bingyu Supreme does not have the courage to dare to fight against Jian Wushuang in the Void Universe, but he will definitely make some secret trips, which can't be avoided. The 3 of them said as they walked out of the hall and stopped. King Jiujia turned to look at Jian Wushuang, and Shen said, Sword Wushuang, I won't say much about this seat. In short, be careful. Okay, you are here. And you are also careful about that guy Long Qing, who has been deliberately looking for opportunities to retaliate. And now I leave. I'm afraid he will put the spear on you. Wu Jian Wushan said in a deep voice. Only him. There was a scorn of contempt on the king's face. 7th team, inside the bamboo house. Wu Heiyuan supremely explained Xiang Jian Wushuang a few words, and then left the bamboo house. He is free-spirited, and although he does not take a risk to the swordless universe, since the of the universe has decided, he will not be upset by the pretense of pretending to be contrived. As he said, as early as when he went to the extraterrestrial battlefield, everyone should have the consciousness of hanging his head on his belt and dying at any time. Before long, Lan Lan knocked on the door of the bamboo house. Master Blue. Wu Jianso nodded at her. Sword Wushuang, didn't you say that? Don't call me Lord Lan. It seems too polite, just call me Xiao Lan. Tong Lan Lan said with a smile. Okay. Wu Jian Wushuang touched his nose dumbly. This Lan Lan, I am afraid that he will be dozens of times of chaos. The 2 greetings made a few words, and immediately, they saw Lan Lan flipping his right hand, and took out a black waistband saying, Sword unparalleled. This is specially made by my master some time ago, and it can be blocked to some extent. Stay in the breath of divine power. This is the route of your journey to the virtual universe. It is good. Yan Jianwushuang's face swelled with dignity, and took over this waist card. Suddenly, a soft light surged from the waistband, turning it into an invisible mask, covering the sword incomparably. The sword's magical breath suddenly disappeared slowly. At the same time, there is some news about the virtual universe, which is released in Jian Wushuang's mind. Sword unparalleled. Although this waist card can cover the breath of divine power on your body, but the biggest feature of the virtual universe is that it cannot be imitated. Lan Lan Surong said. Illness and explosion? Jian Jianwa's eyes narrowed. Yes. Bien Lan Lan nodded and replied. One of the imaginary marks and the virtual explosion is their supernatural power evolution, and the other is their realm evolution. This cannot be replaced or imitated. Therefore, when you go to the virtual universe, you must control it so that there is no fighting, and you should not let people see your left shoulder. There are no virtual marks. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded thoughtfully. Pu Lanlan replied. Okay, then I'll go first, take care. 23 days later, the 4 men, Sword Master Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme, led by God of the Era, came to the void crack. For people, if the old man didn't guess wrong, the imaginary universe opposite should be the periphery of a sect door. If you can, you and the other 4 must join this door to explore the news. Also, the old card given to you by your husband can send news from the virtual universe at any time. If you find out anything, you must send the news back as soon as possible. Wu Zhou stood with his hands up, exhorted. Yes. The 4 of them nodded, and without hesitation, stepped into the void. How? Wu Jianshuang only felt the darkness in his eyes, and then turned around. It seems that the whole world is turning over quickly. Alas! As if through the endless time and space, the universe is flooded, and immediately, a bright light is constantly enlarged in front of the eyes. Ha! Jian Jianwushuang fell, jumping out of a black hole. This is the virtual universe. Wu Jianshou narrowed his eyes and raised his eyes to look around. I saw a green hill come in, and there was the sound of gurgling streams in my ears. A monster with a 4-horse, a human head, and a halberd is staring at them. On his left shoulder, a long mark is particularly dazzling, a mark-level fictitious person. Enemy. The next moment, the celebrity's monster was hitting his spirits, and he was about to scream. Not good. When everyone saw this, their hearts were sinking. This monster with a stingy body must be sent by the Void Universe, who is responsible for guarding this void crack. Just when everyone dared to take action, Jian Wushuang already turned into a sword on and sprinted past in an instant. The sky was torn, almost instantaneously, and the monster on the top of the horse just shouted an enemy character. Jian Wushuang had split it with the sword and cut his entire body. Soon after, Jian Wu's eyes twinkled in the light, and with a big wave of his hand, Zhen Tianbei was used by him to suppress the monster fiercely. All these actions are coming to an extreme. By the time the other 3 reacted, Jian Wushuang had done everything. Seeing this, Lingyu, Ram, and Bingyu Supreme all looked at each other with a long breath in their hearts. I was okay. I stopped it in time. Otherwise I was just afraid that the voice just shouted and they were exposed. Jian Wushuang, I'm waiting for you. Shi Lingyu and the Ram supremely arched their hands in surprise, saying gratefully. It was the supreme ice-cold humming with no saltiness, no gratitude on his face. Chapter 4463. Well, I don't want to stay here too much. I'll wait until I leave. Qi Jian Wushuang closed Jin Tianbei and said. Yes. Supreme Master Lingyu and Supreme Master Ram responded quickly, while Supreme Master Bingyu glanced at Jian Wushuang in an oblique manner, with a strange tone of yin and yang. Why? Is this your captain? Let everyone? Wu Jian Wushuang ignored him. If this place is not a virtual universe, he would have stabbed him with a sword. Even though the saying on the mouth of Sun Bingshu and Supreme was to follow a sword Wushuang, he was rushing towards a mountain peak. Rumble. A hole was blasted in the peak of Laozhan Mountain, and Jian Wushuang took the lead and walked in. Snapped. Wuzhen Tianbei was waved by Jian Wushuang, suspended in front of everyone. Tianjin Tianbei is a magic weapon for space confinement. It was originally of little use to Jian Wushuang, but it was unexpected that it played a role in the virtual universe today. In the town monument of Cheongjin, they turned into thumb-sized monsters and looked at the 4 people nervously. You, who are you? What do you want to do? I am the 3 elders of alchemy. I urge you to quickly release me. Otherwise, once our alchemy is taught and found that I am missing, some of you will enter the earth and escape can't hunt. As soon as this remark came to an end, Jian Wushuang and Lingyu Supreme looked at each other, both frowning. It seems this person doesn't know about the universe. Also, this place is called Lianshan Zone. Wu Jianshuang cleared his throat and asked hoarsely, do you still want to ask who we are? I slept here a long time ago. You disturbed our slumber. What? You sleep in this void forbidden? The monster, who was stunned by the head and horse, was shocked, and then quickly said, Senior, the little inadvertently disturbed the senior's sleep. Please let the senior ignore the villain, and let the villain go. Snapped. He saw the 2 legs in front of him soften, and fell down on his knees, immediately scratching his head like pounding garlic. Jian Wushuang saw this, with a faint smile in her heart. It seems that this guy in front of him can be used as a waystone for the first time in the virtual universe. He converged his thoughts, and Jian Wushuang continued to ask with a hoarse voice. This one asks you, why are your refining gods here? What is the situation outside now? Upon hearing that, the monster on the head of the pony has no doubt that he was there, and returned quickly. Senior, every void period in this void forbidden area will be guarded by one of the top forces in the universe. In recent years, we have been guarded again by our refining gods. Oh, have you been practicing the sect of God before guarding it? Wu Jinshuang frowned. The situation is a bit wrong. You must know that in his universe, there are constant wars and extraterritorial battlefields, and there are continuous virtual men pouring out through the void cracks. If it wasn't for the of the universe, he would have feared that the universe had already been breached. But looking at this person, there is no doubt about his appearance. He has no doubt whether it is from another universe. Then it proves that this person should be unaware of the existence of a different universe. Moreover, if those vagrants who attacked the universe, they attacked the universe through the void cracks they just appeared, then this person cannot fail to know. They just appeared, and it's impossible to be guarded by just this one. There must be something he didn't know. After 3 hours, Wu Jianso walked out of the cave, his eyes flashed with thought. Through the side-by-side attack just now, he finally got some information. The place here is called the Void Forbidden Area. Here, like the far north of the universe where Jian Wushuang is located, it belongs to the forbidden space of the virtual universe. In this void, there are a number of unclear void cracks. This void crack is different from the void cracks produced by the powerful fight against the broken void of the universe. These void cracks lead to the heavens and heavens. No one knows where exactly these cracks will lead. I only know that generally, those who enter the void crack can rarely come out again. What's more, every other virtual era, there will be different top forces in the virtual universe to defend the void. He is now guarding the forbidden land of the void, and is not far from here. Refining Shinzong is the top sect of the universe. The vassals in the sect are mainly corpses. The biggest card is to suppress a huge and immortal unnamed corpse, according to the monster on the head of the man, except for the inner teaching of Zhong Nei, and the most important existence of the elder Taishang. Even he could not touch the unknown fairy corpse. Jian Wushuang, the situation is almost clear. What should we do next? Sun Lingyu Supreme stepped out of the cave, and said to Xiang Wushuang. After Jian Wushuang thought for a moment, Jingguang flashed in his eyes and said, "In my guess, it is impossible for refining Shenzong to not know about our universe, but this person's status is too low to reach the core. Things in this universe should be like our universe. News has been blocked, and only the top people in the universe know about it. Therefore, if we really want to find out their deployment plan of attacking our universe, it is just useless to just inquire about it. It is probably useless. There is only one way, that is." Speaking of this, Jian Wushuang's words stopped, and he turned to look forward to Lingyu Supreme, and said with a burning gaze, "That is to enter the refining god sect." At this moment, the Ram Supreme and the Ice Cricket Supreme also came out, and when they heard the words of Jian Wushuang, they couldn't help but be shocked. Absolutely no way. Refining Shenzong as the top sect of the virtual universe, there must be an invincible and supreme level 6 marked victories. If we go in, we are in danger of being discovered at any time. Yes, this is too risky. Supreme Lingyu and Supreme Ram shook their heads again and again. Supreme Master Bingbing even dismissed a sneer and sneered. "No, brainless husband. If you just rush into the refining divine sect like this, what's the difference between sending death? Is that so?" Jian Wushuang was not annoyed at the sight, but raised his eyebrows and said gently, "What do you mean? Of course it's lurking down. From a long-term perspective, slowly figure it out." Bing stood supremely and returned proudly, "Stupid." Wu Jianwushuang glanced at him and sneered. "Now the universe will be under pressure at any time, and the universe will be attacked through the cracks in the void. When you come down slowly, I can go back to the universe to collect the dead. You." Suddenly angry, Yan Bingxian heard his words full of divine power, and he wanted to fight against the sword unparalleled. "Come, just because the last battle was too late to kill you completely, you were rescued by the Emperor Taishu, and you just waited to die here as you said. It would be better for me to kill you first." Wu Jianshou twisted his neck and looked back at him without fear. Suddenly the air condensed. Chapter 4464. In the void, a surge of sword-strength breath continued to radiate from Jian Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme. Bing's face full of anger, staring at Jian Wushuang stubbornly, his eyes spitting fire. Sword and sword unparalleled, looked back at him with the same cold eyes. In this virtual universe, he is unwilling to have conflicts and wants to try to take the overall situation as much as possible. But this does not mean that he will be bullied by others, and the Bingyu Supreme will be able to step on his head. Okay, what are you doing? We are here to inquire about the news, not to fight internally. The Ram Supreme and the Mingyu Supreme hurried round the road. Bing Extreme heard a complexion in the face for a while, then finally snorted, "Don't go over," and didn't speak again. Jian Wushuang saw this and could not help but sneer. Fortunately, this battle stopped before the outbreak. Lingyu Supreme took a deep breath. "Dear everyone, I agree with Jian Wushuang's opinion. Now that the situation is urgent, I can only wait for the time to quickly explore the real news of the virtual universe and return it to the Lord God. Only adults can make arrangements. Otherwise, even if I stay here and lurk down, I just waste time." "I agree." After a moment of thought, the cricket ram nodded and said. Immediately, the three looked at Bingyu Supreme. "Bingao, what do you think?" Extreme cannot help looking even more ugly. "Don't all three of you make a decision? You still need to ask me what you are doing?" Bingshuan snorted extremely, which is also a promise of this plan. "Then the most critical question now is how to enter the refining deities." Wu Lingyu Supreme asked. The three men of Jian Wushuang did not speak, but frowned. "Look, should we sneak in?" The cricket ram extremely scratched his back and asked. Wu Wushuang heard the words, could not help but glanced at him, and said lightly, "No, it's really trying to die if you go in this way." Several people discussed for a while, and the plans were all rejected by Jian Wushuang. The Ram Supreme could not help but say, "This won't work, that won't work either." "Jian Wushuang, then you talk about what we should do. Go in." Jian Wushuang did not rush back to him, but glanced back at the cave, the Remy horse monster that was suppressed in the town monument, and said, "Go in brightly." "Huh? What? Go in brightly? Isn't that really looking for death?" "Sword unparalleled, I think you still obediently back aside. Let this seat take command." As soon as he said this, the Ram Supreme and the Spirit Jade Supreme were both absent-minded, while the Ice Cricket Supreme was sneer. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and did not talk about the Bingyu Supreme, but looked at the Ram Supreme and Lingyu Supreme, and said, "You forgot, what the monster with the horse head said just now is the Ingjia who is refining the world. Is it an apprenticeship? For us, as long as we are careful, the possibility of entering the refining deities is not small, and once we enter, we are generally not suspected." He compares his heart to his heart. Are you and the other lords who have opened up a force in this universe? Will you suddenly suspect that one of the disciples is a fake person posing? You won't even think about it at all. But if you sneak into it, once caught, you will be immediately suspected, and various investigations will be launched. At that time, even if we didn't find out that we were from another universe, we would definitely be directly imprisoned or killed. The words of Jian Wushuang fell, and all three frowned, thinking carefully about the feasibility of the words spoken by Jian Wushuang. Yes, because of their strength, they want to see through their authenticity. Unless they are the strongest level of refining Shinzong, can they see through their authenticity when they show their flaws? While they came in, as the most powerful group in the universe, would they notice the selection of disciples? The most, but just a little attention, the most talented ones. Therefore, this seems the most dangerous way to enter the refining Shinzong. But it is the safest. All of you. Our greatest difficulty is when we enter the refining deities. No one knows what their entry assessment is. Unknown means danger. You should think carefully. Jian Wushuang said something, and after speaking, they would no longer care about them. For Jian Wushuang, this time it is imperative to go to refining Shinzong, not only to explore the news of the virtual universe invading the universe, but more importantly, He must go in to understand the structure of virtual force. Only in this way can he understand the virtual force, and then completely solve the time bomb tied to himself, the three-headed snake Willow. Ask for wealth and wealth fight. The risk is high, but it also means that the gain is high. The Ram Supreme and the Spirit Jade Supreme looked at each other, and then they bit their teeth and decided. And Bing Extreme, the eyes are blinking, I don't know what I'm thinking about. It's not until a moment has passed before saying okay. Immediately, the four men knocked side by side, and learned from the monster's mouth that the head of the horse was the exact time for the reincarnation of Shinzong. After waiting until there was no question at all, Jian Wushuang took the monster of the head and horse together with the town of Tianbei, together into the Qianquan ring. Zongmen, the top of the virtual universe similar to Lian Shinzong etc. Zongmen must have a life card with a record of life and death. Once this head of the monster is dead in their hands, the life card is broken, only afraid that the refining Shinzong will soon move. He put them into the Changchuan ring, and when the refining deities came to the reaction, when the elders in the rain disappeared, they had already entered the refining deities. After doing all of this, the four of them changed their looks and turned into monsters, rushing towards the Lian Shinzong. Wujian Wushuang turned into a weird man with pointed ears and long wings, while Lingyu Supreme and others were either monsters with crystals or sheep-headed monsters. It's too easy for them to be the Supreme. Alas! A blast of fresh wind blew through the ears of the four, and it didn't take long for the four to cross the starry sky, and they saw a towering mountain peak soaring above the stars. Refining Shinzong, here it is. Beneath the mountain peak, hundreds and thousands of vagrants with different breadths and strengths were waiting outside the gate of the Shinzong mountain. These monsters are born in a variety of ways, and the swords look like four people. In this group of monsters, it is nothing more than ordinary insignificant. Let's go. Chapter 4465. Under the gate of Lian Shinzong Mountain, there was a disturbance, and there was a noise. Su Shi from all directions are gathered here, some cross-knee meditation, silent practice of power, and some everywhere to talk to people, want to forge good destiny. The four men of Jian Wushuang saw each other, and could not help looking at each other. It seems that the vain people of this imaginary universe are not much different from this universe. According to the monster on the head of the human horse, if you want to worship the refining God, you must reach the star level, which is the mastery of the universe. I looked around. At this moment, when I came to refining Shinzong to worship the mountain gate, they were basically 2-star to 7-star priests, that is the second-level master in this universe, and the monks who were almost invincible. Seeing this, Wu Jinshuang and other people also reduced the cultivation to the level of dominance. Under the waist card made by the of the god, the breath revealed by the four people was immediately no different from those around them. In order to reduce the risk of exposure, Jian Wushuang and others did not talk to the surrounding Su Shi, but quietly sat cross-legged, waiting for Lian Shinzong to open the mountain gate. Time flies. There are more and more Su Shi coming around refining Shinzong. Among them there is even a trace of Su Shi strong. A mark the corresponding is the elementary supreme in this universe. In the universe where Jian Wushuang is located, once they step into the supreme realm, it is the power to overlook the universe. All of them are not only one hegemon, or the mainstay of the top sect, the top combat power. After a month, rumble. The gate of the refining Shinzong suddenly opened, and thunders transformed by countless powerless forces breathed and exuded a powerful breath. A middle-aged man wearing sackcloth, a coffin on his back, tied with a blue rope around his waist, a green body, and 2 tentacles on his head, stepped out of the mountain door step by step. Refining Shinzong, it is not other things but corpses. According to the monster with the head and horse's head, there is a coffin mountain in the refined god sect. The mountain is full of coffins. Lying inside the coffin are various powerful corpses that have long fallen from the universe. Every disciple of the refining god sect, after entering the refining god sect, will enter the coffin mountain, refining one of his own corpses. This is precisely the reason why the Emperor Shinzong is refining, and the trace-level virtual princes in Mingzong are not too many. but they can dominate the virtual universe. Because once the corpse of thee is refined, it is equivalent to owning an even more powerful clone helper on his own basis. This is the root of the universe where the refining gods relied on to crush the void. The person who had a tentacle refining Shinzong had a strong breath. As soon as Fong stepped out, he exclaimed in the crowd, "I didn't think that this time, the elder of the supreme religious sect had to visit the town. The elder must be a 3-mark vagrant. What's the situation?" This is the first time that Lien Shinzong has received his disciples and sent a strong man who is too senior to the elder level. The discussion sounded loudly, and everyone's expressions were unbelievable. Among those who came to worship the sect of refining sect, the Su Shi who had been on the mark was originally a high and unreserved appearance. After seeing this elder of the gods, he bowed his head and did not dare to maintain the slightest pride. Attitude. I saw 2 tentacles on the top of the head, and the whole body skin was green. The elder mustache, his eyes were as plain as water, swept across the faces, and then he said, "This time we refine the sacred religion to recruit disciples, and this seat was personally seated by the seat. Some muddy waters to fish and robbers, it is best to quickly retreat, otherwise once this seat is found, we will blame this seat for not being emotional." As soon as this remark was made, there was a commotion in the crowd. Nearly 100 virtual men. A flash of strife flashed on his face, and sometimes he looked at the elder of God, and sometimes looked down and thoughtfully, and finally had to sigh and retreat obediently. Yes, every time the refining Shinzong widely recruits his disciples. When he admits his disciples, there will be some bad people with bad intentions. He joined the refining Shinzong only for the corpses. Elder God Su looked at the people who had retreated from the crowd, nodded with satisfaction, and then said in a deep voice, "Then, this seat announces that the Shinzong introductory examination will begin now." Boom! The words of the crickets fell, and a huge stone foundation appeared in front of everyone. "What is that?" Ling Lingyu Supreme and Ram Supreme narrowed their eyes and whispered. Wu Jianwushwang thought about it and said, "It is estimated that it is a testing instrument used to test the talent, or how well it fits with the practice of refining Shinzong. Aren't we?" The Ram Supreme looks worried. "Don't talk about talent, they are not the people of this universe at all. Look at it." Wu Jianwushwang thought back. Upon hearing the words, the Ram Supreme and Lingyu Supreme glanced at each other, then nodded helplessly. Bien is the Supreme Bingyu. This time without a word stabbed Sword Wushwang a few words, making Jian Wushwang quite surprised, cannot help frowning. Before coming to refining Shinzong, Bingyu Supreme disappeared for a while, and then when he came back to meet them, he became dumb and looked quite demented. What the is he doing? Wu Jianshou narrowed his eyes, and there was a slightly ominous premonition in his heart. At the same time, the assessment officially kicked off. He saw the elder god must point to the suspended stone in the air, and said in a deep voice, "This thing is a talent detection stone. One is to detect your waiting talents, and the other is to check how well you and I practice Shinzong practice. You only need to line up one by one later. Just step on this cornerstone. By then, this cornerstone will naturally be evaluated with your talents and suitability to show the light. Of course, the flickering of the cornerstones has proven that you are talented and able to stay, but if the cornerstones do not respond at all, it is a pity that you are not qualified enough to pass the selection. Wherever you come from, please return back. Go do and enter our refining deities." Elder Godbeard said that he glanced at the crowd and continued, "There are 4 types of light shining from the trial stone. Red is inferior, blue is medium, purple is superior, and gold represents with superior qualifications." Chapter 4466. Rumble. With the order of the Elder God Beard, hundreds of disciples have begun their majestic assessment. A 4-star Su Shi who had 3 heads and 6 arms came to the front of the trial cornerstone. He breathed a breath, sighed, stepped out, and stepped on the trial cornerstone suspended in the void. The trial stone did not move, but a strong red light suddenly burst out and hovered over everyone's head. Red light, inferior qualification. Everyone looked up at the top of their heads. Some people looked disdainful, But most of them looked at the 4-star Su Shi with a hint of envy. After all, the evaluation of the refining Shinzong is notoriously rigorous. Once there were geniuses who had qualified in other sects, or the vain who had already made a big name in the universe. An inferior qualification. So, as Elder Godbeard said, as long as the trial stone can shine for you, it already represents your extraordinary talents, and the god of religion will recruit you. The 4-star Su Shi looked at the thick red light above his head, with a look of joy, but there was still a dimness in his eyes, apparently not satisfied with his inferior qualifications. The elder god must take a look at the 4-star Su Shi, then withdrew his gaze, and announced with no expression, "Red light inferior." Suddenly, in the rich red light in the sky, a purple light suddenly appeared. Although the purple light was extremely thin like the wind blows away, it floated a little and finally hovered on top of the red light. Okay. The elder god's indifferent expression changed instantly, and his eyebrows were raised slightly. Looking again at the 4-star virtuoso, who had no expression on his face, smiled and said, "Congratulations, purple light medium talent." It is not surprising that God must change the attitude of the elders. Even many people who have assessed have paid more attention to the 4-star virtual priests. It is necessary to know that those who practice the divine sect disciples have flashed purple light in this talent test stone. In the future, the worst achievements will also be 7-star virtual men. In the face of this rising star, the people who go to the knot will naturally be in the minority. 24-star Su Shi laughed loudly, was full of heroism. He strode to the right of the square, where he could pass the examination, and stood under the gate of the Lian Shinzong mountain. The other disciples who practiced Shinzong, looking at the 4-star Su Shi below, also looked slightly, showing a kind smile. Soon, another weird-looking duke walked to the cornerstone of the trial. This man was trained to be a 5-star duke, and he was even higher than the previous one. I saw his expression was excited, and his steps were heavy. As soon as he stepped on, he flew up and landed on the cornerstone of the trial. And this time, the trial cornerstone remained motionless, but the light never flickered. For a moment, the weird-looking Su Shi seemed to have foreseen something, frowning, and he struck once again, stepping on the black stone fiercely. The final result remains unchanged, no light flashes. Damn, how could this be? The weird-looking Su Shi paused for a moment, and then roared, stepping down on the cornerstone of the trial with a sullen face. However, no matter how he trampled on, and no power broke out, the cornerstone of the trial didn't react at all. Sun's weird-looking Su Shi was unwilling, and waved his fist desperately. He couldn't accept such an ending. At this moment, the elder man on the platform waved his sleeve, a white halo hit, and the weird man with the strange appearance floated out of the gate. The elder Godbeard shook his head and said lightly, "Next." The appraisers are all with their hearts in mind. This is the cruelty of practice. Once you set foot on this road, you will never have a chance to turn back. You can only climb up desperately, and you cannot tolerate the slightest slack. Otherwise you will be eliminated. The 4 men of Jianjian Wushuang stood behind, and looked at the scene expressionlessly. "It's our turn," said the Supreme Ram a little nervously. After all, they are not people in the virtual universe. The cultivation system is completely different. Even if they have the tokens given by the gods of the universe, they just hide the breath of divine power in them. As for whether they can be detected by the test bedrock, there is no bottom in my heart. One after another, there are people who have passed the test of the trial cornerstones, among which even Jingguang Mantian has reached the super qualification. I suddenly exclaimed in the crowd. Even the elder, the beard who always had no expression on his face, and a mild smile on his face, reached out his hand, and brought the super qualified person into the gate. Chi Chaos qualifications represent that this person has entered the trace level in the future, and it is already a sure thing. Next person. In the voice of Elder Godbeard, the ram took a deep breath and stepped out. He is a supreme practice, and he is also used to the strong winds and waves in the universe, and he is on the top of his side. However, at this moment, he was nervous and sweating on his forehead. Here is the void universe, the top force of the void universe, with the 6 marked Su Shi's base camp for refining Shinzong. Once tadpoles are found, they are likely to fall here. Sword is unparalleled. Will the rams be okay? Supreme Master Ling Lingyu was beside him, and asked a little worried. Do not know. Qi Jian Wushuang stared at the back of the Ram Supreme gradually, and his heart became extremely extreme. The name of the visitor is coming. The elder god had to glance at the Ram supremely, and said lightly. In his eyes, the Ram Supreme covered by the back of the god's waist card is no different from an ordinary 3-star vagrant. Here is the sheep. The cricket Ram Supreme arched his hand, and reported a pseudonym. Well, you start. The elder god must give him a slight look and said, Yes. Ram nodded supremely, but stepped out, walking on the sky, one step on the cornerstone of the trial. At this moment, not only the Ram Supreme, but also the 3 masters, such as Lingyu Supreme and Jian Wushuang, are extremely nervous. My breath is over. 2 breaths passed. After 9 full breaths passed, the trial cornerstones did not respond, and no light was emitted. It should be that we are not people in this universe, so no talent can be detected. Wu Lingyu Supreme thought and said, This result, although somewhat disappointing, is not unacceptable. After all, as long as no identity is revealed, everything can be discussed in the long run. He thinks not only of Lingyu Supreme, but also of the Ram Supreme on the cornerstone of the trial, even the God-bearer. Talent is 0 back down. He was just when God required the elders to speak indifferently, and the Ram Supreme resigned. Ding! Ding 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 dash! Ding 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 ding! The cornerstone of the trial, a sharp alarm sounded suddenly. Chapter 4467. The sharp alarm sounded suddenly in front of the gate of Lian Shinzong Mountain. Suddenly Lingyu Supreme, Jian Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme all changed their faces. What a mess exposed! The God-bearer elder, who had already bowed his head, and was about to call another dummy to come to the trial, raised his head sharply, and looked towards the Ram Supreme. You are not from our universe. The elder god's eyes had skyrocketed in the eyes of the elder, and he looked at the Ram supremely. The next moment, he immediately raised his hand, and patted towards the Ram Supreme. The horrible virtual power erupted directly, slamming it towards the Ram Supreme. Damn! The Ram Supreme face changed without any concealment. The supreme divine power of the whole body was mobilized, and his whole body began to skyrocket. In just a blink of an eye, the Ram Supreme breath was fully released, and the supreme coercion broke through the sky, which was not inferior to this God-bearer elder. Immediately afterwards, the Ram Supreme raised his right hand, facing the palm of the elder. Ha! In that moment, the horrible and mighty power turned upside down, like the tsunami of the Tianhe water, spreading out and spreading the mighty power, and directly crushed the victories around you, crushing them into powder. Go! The cricket ram screamed and slammed his feet. He turned it into a sky-like stalk, and blasted towards the starry sky at a great distance. Sword unparalleled, Bingyu, this is impossible, we retreat. Sun Lingyu Supreme said quickly to Jian Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme, and then the divine power burst out suddenly, turning into a skyward light, rushing in the opposite direction to the Ram Supreme. The elder god had to see this, and immediately frowned, as if he had realized something. First, he immediately spread his voice towards the Zongman, and then looked at Jian Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme, and said, They are a gang central demon, stop them. Boom! I saw the lid of the coffin carried by the elder Godbeard blasting, and a corpse whose skin was dark and dry, and his facial features melted like a candle, rushed out of the coffin, and made a roar on the sky. Immediately, the cadaver rushed towards Jian Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme. It's not over yet. Among the refining deities behind the elder Godbeard, there are again a few light rays that are not weaker than the elder Godbearer, and rush out from it. Among them, most of them rushed towards Ram Supreme and Lingyu Supreme, and there were a few remaining ones, surrounded by Jian Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme. Go! The cold sword of Wu Jianhui's eyes was cold, and when he just wanted to escape, he saw that the iced man with a numb and stunned expression was extremely supreme. He suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed Jian Wushuang's wrist. Ice! Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's heart was furious. He didn't expect that Bingyu Supreme would stumble at this time. He turned his head coldly and saw Binjian's ridiculous ironic smile at the corner of his mouth. The next moment, he saw an inch of ice on his body and finally shattered. Mirror Flower Water Moon Avatar. Wu Jianwushuang instantly understood. I was afraid that the Bingyu Supreme disappeared in front of me. This is the moment. How? For a moment, the dry corpse refined by the elder god must fall in front of Jian Wushuang with 3 scar-level strong men and surround the sword without pair. One of the old men with dark spots on his face, a thin body, and eyes all over his body, suddenly had 5 long marks on his left shoulder. 5 scored Susure. Half-step invincible extreme. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's face was extremely gloomy. At the same time, on a mountain peak far away from Lianshanzong, a young man with silver-haired eyes opened his eyes slowly, and a touch of color came from his face. Fortunately, this seat has been anticipated. For the sake of insurance, let the clone go first. Sun Bingshu stood up, looking through countless clouds, looking towards the direction of Lianshanzong. Swords warriors, I see you die this time. Ha ha ha. At the peak of Laoshan Mountain, there was the cold laughter of Bingyu. The next moment, Bingyu Supreme stepped on his right foot, and his body disappeared into the mountain instantly. In front of the gate of Shinzong Mountain, together with that dry corpse, a full 4 trace-level virtual men surrounded the sword unparalleled and blocked all retreats of the sword unparalleled. Say, where are you from? What do you want to do when you joined the refining god sect? A monster with a sickle-shaped head looked at Jian Wushuang coldly. Wu Jianshuang's face remained calm, but his mind was extremely alert. This is definitely one of the biggest crises he has ever encountered. He knew in his heart that as long as his answer was a little careless, he would be bombarded by the monks who practiced the god of sect. At that time, don't say that he is just an elementary supreme. Even if he is invincible supreme, I'm afraid it will be difficult to survive. I don't understand what you are talking about. Wu Jianshou took a deep breath, and his expression returned calmly. Pretend garlic? Aren't you with the 3 who just fled? The questioning scab-shaped Susure with skull-shaped head just replied. Wu Jianshou shook his head and replied, Sir, I think you're wrong. I'm just on the way to meet them together. I don't know them. Haha, are you a fool? The scythe-like Susure disdainful to return. I tell you, you are already in trouble today. If you tell the truth, this seat can still give you a happy, otherwise you can blame this seat to make you a living corpse directly. As a slave, be slaved by my disciple. Jian Wushuang heard the words. His eyes could not help but chill in his mouth, and said calmly, Master, I really don't know what you are saying. I just met them on the road. That's it. At the same time, Jian Wushuang's right hand quietly held the hilt of the Terra Excalibur. The drowsy beast still fights. If these people really do believe it, they will fight for it. Unlucky you. I was just a sickle-shaped 5-marked dummy with a scythe-shaped head, and an anger flashed on his face, unable to bear the attack. Among these people, Xiao was the highest, and the 5-marked virtual warrior who threatened the sword unparalleled, waved his hand and said lightly, It's useless to say more. Then, go to the cornerstone of the trial to test it. What you say is true or false. Naturally there will be results. After speaking, the 5-marked Susure with eyes full covered the sword Wushuang's face. It is good. He didn't hesitate. Wushuang nodded his head and strode toward the cornerstone of the trial. Chapter 4468. When Jian Wushuang stepped into the trial cornerstone, an invisible force emerged from the trial cornerstone, continuously scanning inside Jian Wushuang's body. Jian Wushuang's back was facing the elders of the refining Shenzong, and his face was extremely gloomy. Behind Jian Wushuang, the 4 mark-level virtual men, who blocked Jian Wushuang's retreat, were staring at Jian Wushuang's back. In addition, there are many more disciples who came to participate in the selection of Lian Shenzong, staring blankly at Jian Wushuang. They didn't know what was going on. They only knew how many swords were paired with swords, and they were able to draw the power from Shenzong. A breath has passed. 2 breaths passed. Tried the cornerstone, still no response. The ephemeral time seemed extremely long at this moment. After a while, the eyebrows suddenly narrowed as the highest 5-mark class Su Shi was repaired. The sickle-headed Su Shi, who threatened to slay the sword unparalleled, had a sneer hanging from the corner of his mouth. Just when the cornerstone of the trial was about to sound an alarm, Jian Wushuang had quietly grasped the hilt of the Terra Excalibur sword, and was ready to go straight out of the sheath to perform the Taro to take the lead. The seal of Zeus on his neck was loose. A force belonging to the 3-headed snake delirium rushed out of him, instantly entangled with the scanning of the test cornerstone that had gradually receded. Boom! Suddenly, the world changed. An array of light never flashed on the cornerstone of the trial. In front of the mountain gate of the entire Lianshenzong, the clouds were dark in an instant, and the sky was dim, because the flickering light was like a galaxy black light. Moreover, unlike all the previous rays that only covered the gate of the Lianshenzong mountain, the practicing black mang swayed upwards and went straight to the sky, eventually forming a huge thick black cloud above the sky. At this moment, the entire refining sect is under the worship of the black cloud. It hangs in the air like an ancient giant, forming a sense of urgency of black cloud over the city. Everyone raised their heads in unison and stared blankly at the dark light. All of them were shocked by the waves and shocked. It's rare in the audience, it becomes a dead silence. Hymen turned out to be black. Red represents lower qualifications. Blue represents medium qualifications. Purple represents superior qualifications. And gold represents superior qualifications. What does black stand for? At this moment, everyone looked up at the black light, and the black light was like smoke and tide, as if it were a raging smoke, covering the sky and the sun. The mighty, dark clouds over the city want to destroy. Jiaguang opened to the golden scales of Japan. At this moment, the sky seemed to collapse, leaving only the thick black clouds. Under that dark cloud, Jian Wushuang, a black robe without wind, automatically filled the whole person with a sense of evil. The 4 elders, including the elder bearded man, who was responsible for the selection of the disciples of the religious sect, all flashed a look of mistakes. Immediately, this mistake was replaced by shock. Those who have come to participate in the selection are already exclaimed. What is this? What the happened? Why is it black? This black light is too horrible. Its richness, even if it represents golden light of superb qualifications, is simply incomparable. This black light is unprecedented. What does it mean? The talented disciples who had detected the golden light looked arrogant and stood tall. Even the expressions suddenly sank. Everyone was puzzled. Even one of the elders who was still in the refining sect for a short time was curious. Elder Wind, what does this black light mean? The Elder Wind Moose is the 5-marked virtuoso, who was repaired the highest in the audience. Chapter 4470. Inside the coffin, the dead body was soaring. A solid black mist condensed into the sky, covering the sun and the moon. Wooden coffins, sarcophagi, bronze coffins and other coffins of various shapes, lying quietly in the mountains, waiting for someone to choose. Elder Moose Feng stepped in the void and stood with his hands on his shoulders. He looked at Jian Wushuang and chose the coffin. Miss Shuang, there are corpses all over the coffin. These corpses have different practices during their lives, ranging from ordinary star-studded priests to scarred priests, even to the 5 marks on this seat. Class Su Shi can be found in this coffin. The cultivation of these corpses during their lifetime is indeed an important part worthy of reference. After all, this largely determines the future growth of this corpse. However, you must not choose the corpses according to the height of the cultivation, because the fit of the corpses with you is more important than the cultivation of the corpses before their death. There were a lot of new disciples who had just started to practice Shinzong. They only selected the corpses that were cultivated as high. In the end, not only could they not refine the corpses, but they did not make progress by themselves. The most important thing was that they were still the corpse was back-bitten, and his life was lost in vain. Such examples are endless. Fog double. You should understand the meaning of the old man. Therefore, Wu Shuang, the most important thing in selecting the corpse is to look at the degree of matching with you. As for the degree of matching, the old man can only say that you rely on your first feeling to see the beads. Does it fit? Jian Wu's eyes flashed a brilliant light, and then walked towards the first coffin. It was a wooden coffin lying quietly in front of him. As soon as he approached the wooden coffin, Jian Wuxuang felt a blast of Jin Ge's killing spirit. In an instant, the sword Wuxuang seemed to fall into the blood of the corpse. Thousands of horses and horses. A burly man wearing war armor, wearing a black iron helmet, and covered with a silver mask, struck across the cosmic sky and slaughtered. Iron hoof flattened in all directions. Elder Moose felt the spread of Jin Ge's killing in the wooden coffin, and nodded his head and said, Miss Shuang, this person is the former warlord Wukong of Taiyin God. It's a little lower, only 8 stars, less than the trace level, but fortunately, rich experience in actual combat, lifelong killing, and going through thousands of battles. If you can make it a corpse, you will definitely have a personal protection general in the future. Jian Wuxuang nodded after hearing the words. Without much hesitation, he took his hand off the wooden coffin cover and headed to the second coffin next to it. Although Jian Wuxuang's void universe is this time to help the gods of the earth to inquire about the news, there are ways to improve their strength now. Naturally, they will not be missed. It is easy. According to the chat between Jian Wuxuang and Elder Moose along the way, he also learned that once the corpse in this coffin had been refined, this corpse would never betray forever except in extreme circumstances. Along the way, no matter whether it is a relative or a friend, you may turn your face for a chance, a good fortune, and fight hard endlessly. But the corpse in this coffin is not. It can be said that once the corpse belonging to itself is refined, then this corpse is equivalent to one of your strongest avatars. The second coffin is a bamboo coffin. When Jian Wuxuang put his hand up, he heard the elder Feng said, The corpse in this bamboo coffin is a contemporary sage of 1,000 moons before the Haoyue Xianmen. Created a feat of 8-star cultivation, charmed a trace-level virtual man, lured him. Wuxuang, if you can refine this corpse, it will also be a huge improvement for you, and you can use it as an unexpected dark chess. However, after experiencing it carefully, Jian Wuxuang still shook his head, took his hand away, and walked towards the third coffin. Still dissatisfied, Elder Moose Wen frowned. In his opinion, the two corpses just now have a high degree of agreement with Jian Wuxuang. Once repaired is not too high, Jian Wuxuang is easy to control refining. There is a corpse of gods, who were all gifted superiors during their lifetime. Although they died horizontally, their growth was extremely high. If Jian Wuxuang can refine it at this time, it will inevitably become the left and right arm of Jian Wuxuang in the future. However, he knows nothing. In fact, the sword is unparalleled. If it is calculated according to the realm of the 2 universes, it is already a mark-level false soldier. For the 2 swords just now, refining will not provide any help. After a series of 5 coffins, Jian Wuxuang all stayed for a short time before shaking his head without hesitation. After half an hour, Jian Wuxuang had already reached the mid-mountainside position of the coffin hill. Among the 5 coffins, there are Tianjiao, who was amazingly talented during his lifetime, but was strangled, and there are extreme gods of war in all directions, but they have not entered the eyes of Jian Wuxuang. Seeing this, Elder Feng's brows could not help but frown. Miss Double, don't look down. Finally, Elder Moose could not help but whispered. Jian Wuxuang heard the words and looked back at Elder Moose Wind, then touched his nose and said, Elder Moose Wind, I have something in mind. What's in your heart? Elder Moose Phone couldn't help but laughed a little, and murmured in his heart. Okay, look at that seat. What kind of body will you choose? With this idea in mind, Elder Moose simply stopped talking, and closed his eyes to let Jian Wushuang choose. Time passes slowly. Jian Wushuang has reached the position of the middle of the mountain. At this position, there are fewer and fewer Tianjiao, who once shined in the universe, but were strangled by various circumstances. Instead, there are some truly in the universe, suppressing the invincible power of 9 days and 10 places, trace-level virtual men. In terms of combat power, this cosmology is higher than the native land of swordless warriors, and more powerful than the strong ones. However, it is still the master of the universe that can storm the sky and control one side of the universe. Jian Wushuang's speed slowed down. He no longer just touched some coffins, but felt the corpse repaired in the coffin and chose to leave. He started a process of thinking. When Elder Moose thought that Jian Wushuang would be in this position, when selecting some corpses, Jian Wushuang's footsteps went up again. One trace. Second trace. Jian Wushuang's footsteps have not stopped. www.novel. The idiot who is not greedy enough to swallow elephants. The Moose Wind Elder immediately felt itchy, and his impression of the sword unparalleled fell sharply. Jian Wushuang is picking the sword corpse. In fact, from another perspective, the corpse is also picking the sword. Previously, those corpses were still low, and they were almost allowed to be screened by Jian Wushuang. It would be good if they wanted to take the refining directly. At the middle of the coffin, there are some 1 and 2 marked corpses, although the realm of his life far surpassed Jian Wushuang. In theory, Jian Wushuang can never be refined. But Jian Wushuang's talent is amazing. But it is a black light, enough to stand by with the ancestors of the refining gods. And these scarred corpses are not impossible to be refined by the sword. But seeing Jian Wushuang like this, clearly is the rhythm to reach the summit. Isn't this stupid? I can walk here and conquer the 5-mark virtual warrior. I'm afraid it is already the limit. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes and looked up. There were only a few coffins at the top of the coffin hill. The breath was extremely horrible, let alone going to the refinement. It was extremely difficult to approach. Well, just this corpse. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and slowly reached out his hand, intending to push open the lid of Xianbing coffin. Seeing this scene, Elder Moose Wind, because he has seen a lot of strong winds and waves, at this moment in his eyes cannot help but look forward to a spark of excitement. He could already imagine how Jian Wushuang refined this 5-marked corpse, then struck the universe, and even attacked those evil species in a different universe. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to open the cover of the Xianbing coffin, it was about to happen. The tailored Excalibur hanging around his waist trembled suddenly. The next moment, an incomparably old and kind voice sounded in his ear. I'm waiting for you. Boom! Suddenly, Jian Wu's double body trembled, and he pulled his hand pressed against the lid of Xianbing coffin. He heard the call of people from hometown. This call comes from the top of the mountain. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wu's eyes filled with firmness, and he hesitated toward the top of the mountain without hesitation. You. Wu Shuang, stop here quickly. Elder Moose Wind suddenly screamed and jumped anxiously. Miss Shuang, what are you doing? Stop. Swordless Wu stepped back, looked back at Elder Moose Wind, and calmly said, Elder Moose Wind, this corpse is not what I want most. It disappoints you. After that, Jian Wushuang didn't say much, and walked towards the top of the mountain step by step. Crazy lunatic. Wushuang, are you crazy? Elder Moose Wind barked suddenly. Watching Jian Wushuang really did not hesitate, he couldn't help but say, Burning the heavens, Wushuang, you are violently heaven. Having said that, Elder Moose Wind saw Jian Wushuang's deafening look, and he couldn't help sighing and screaming, violent heavenly things. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Jian Wushuang's feet were heavy, and he went to the top of the mountain step by step. A huge wave of coercion emanated from several coffins on the top of the mountain, like the tide of the sea, waves of waves slamming towards him, and he wanted to shoot him down the coffin. These coercion, although it was the unconscious distribution of these 6 marked virtual men died. But still not what Jian Wushuang can resist. He felt as if he were carrying hundreds of millions of mountains, stepping forward step by step. Chaos Overlord. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and directly urged Chaos Ba. The use of divine power will be repelled by this universe, and will also be noticed by the Elder Wind Moose. But the chaotic domineering body is the power of the physical body, and this will not happen. Ha! Ha! Chapter 4472. Sword Unparalleled reached the top. At the top of the Coffin Mountain, a black iron coffin full of mysterious patterns is enclosed by 4 chains and is suspended in the air. I'm waiting for you. A thunderous roar resounded in Jian Wushuang's mind. The Taro Excalibur hanging on the sword's waist, constantly humming, trembling violently. If Fei Wushuang had completely controlled the Taro Excalibur, I'm afraid that this Taro Excalibur has been shot out and rushed into this coffin. At this moment, although Jian Wushuang has not yet opened the coffin, in his heart, he basically understood who the person in the coffin was. It is only him that will cause the shock of the Terra sword. But wasn't he dead in the hands of the emperor? How could the body be here? Jian Wushuang's brow frowned, and the light in his eyes kept blinking. Elder Moose Feng stepped in the void and looked at this scene from afar. The expression on his face kept converging and turned into a dignity. Miss Shuang, stop, this corpse is not for you. Elder Moose's expression was somber, said Shun. Back to his sword Wushuang, when Yan raised an eyebrow, pressed the shout in the coffin, turned to look at Elder Moose and asked, Elder Moose, what does this mean? Elder Moose Wind heard a glance at Jian Wushuang and immediately said, This corpse of God is not our universe. Not people in our universe? Jian Wushuang's heart moved, and faintly understood that perhaps at this moment, it was the best time to probe the news. Therefore, Jian Wushuang pretended to understand. Elder Moose Wind, I don't understand what it means. Elder Moose heard the words, he couldn't help flashing a hesitation in his eyes, and immediately looked around, seeing that no one was nearby. He suddenly waved his right hand. Endless virtual power poured out, forming an enchantment, wrapping him with the sword. In it, Shuang, there are some things that I shouldn't have told you, but you have amazing talents. You want to be able to achieve universe-level power in the future. Knowing that these things are just a matter of time, I will make an exception with you today. Talk about it. Jian Wushuang heard his face look awkward, knowing that the topic was coming. I saw the voice of Elder Moose was low, his eyes looked far away, and he said, Miss Shuang, our universe is not the only one. The void and forbidden ground are connected to many cave worlds. These cave sky worlds form their own world, but in general, these cave sky worlds are very small and not much larger than a star field. However, in some of the nodes in the Forbidden Land, the road is a real behemoth, a real universe. No matter the degree of civilization or the overall combat power, this universe is just weaker than us. This universe, we collectively call it the Divine Power Universe. Divine Power Universe? Jian Wushuang's pupil shrank, and this Divine Power Universe should refer to his native universe. Yes, this magical universe is rich in resources and boundless. Among them, Tianjiao is born and power is born. Our universe, and the magical universe, have successively fought over 100,000 chaos ages. Elder Moose nodded his head, turning his gaze to the dark coffin that was bound by chains and suspended in midair, and continued. This coffin corpse comes from the divine universe opposite the void. This person obviously has only a 4-mark level, but if it comes to strength, it is a 6-mark giant that is enough to kill our world. I heard that this person is the opposite of the divine power universe, the first Kendo Supreme that has never been seen in history. It is the opposite universe that suppresses the invincible existence of 9 days and 10 places. Speaking of which, the fall of this person was also an accident. At that time, the Emperor Devourer led the Devourer organization to the divine universe opposite him. He had just encountered this person on the way to the divine universe. Although this person is powerful, compared to the Emperor Eater, it is not a star that is worse than the Emperor. Therefore, after a war, the person fell into the hands of the emperor. We refined the lord of the sect, and bought the corpse of this person from the emperor at a large price. The genius of this corpse is so talented and powerful that it is far from being comparable to our scorching virtuoso. Originally, the Lord bought him back, but also tried to refine it and become our sacred corpse of the sect of the sacred God. However, this person's obsession is so great that even after his death, he will not be reduced by half. The Lord and our 5 elders refined this corpse together, and they could not even refine it. Therefore this corpse has been resting here. Elder Feng Wen said slowly, then turned his eyes, looked at Jian Wushuang, shook his head and said, "So Wushuang, give up this corpse of God, and don't do nothing for nothing." Jian Wushuang heard the words, his eyes flashed for a while. That's it. At the same time, Jian Wushuang quickly thought in his mind, if you refine Taro Supreme, you are equivalent to Taro Supreme reborn and resurrected in another way. At that time, even if he fails to explore the deployment of the virtual universe's combat power against them, he can bring Tai Luo Supreme back to the native universe. Once the war end breaks out, it is also a strong main force. The most important thing is that he got the full inheritance of Tai Luo Supreme. According to a certain degree, Tai Luo Supreme has been counted as his half-master. How can he bear his heart and see Tai Luo Supreme's corpse, placed in a different universe, allowing people to choose and refine? Can't bear it. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wu's eyes flashed a decisive color, and he looked at the Moose Elder and said in a deep voice, "Elder Moose Wind, I have made a decision, and I will refine this alien." You. Elder Moose heard the words, and immediately became angry. Dare to waste your lips and say so much all for nothing? It's really stubborn. Well, Wushuang, I'll take a look at this one. This corpse cannot be refined by the Lord and our 5 elders. How can you refine it? Elder Moose Wind, even with a good temper, felt an irritation in his heart at this moment. With a flick of his sleeve, Elder Moose snorted and stopped talking. Jian Wushuang smiled apologetically at him, then took a deep breath, stretched out his hand, and placed it on the dark coffin in front of him. Alas! It's like dropping a stone on the calm lake surface. Click, click. The iron chain that was tied to the dark coffin suddenly broke down inch by inch. Immediately, he saw the thick black coffin cover full of mysterious patterns, and then moved sideways. Crunchy, crunchy. A harsh sound sounded. The lid of the vertical coffin was completely moved sideways. Next moment, Sword Wushuang looked up sharply and stared into the coffin. Chapter 4473. It wasn't anyone else who was quietly lying in the coffin. It was Taro Supreme. He had a handsome face. His nose was dangling, his eyes were closed, and a pair of sword eyebrows flew straight to the horns, and the whole man was full of sharpness. At first glance, he seemed to be not sleeping, but sleeping. Buzz! At this moment, the Terra Excalibur shook to the extreme. Jian Wushuang froze slightly. He did not expect that Tai Luo Supreme was so young. No wonder it is as strong as Wu Jianxian all dumped for it. Jian Wushuang can already imagine that Tai Luo Supreme relied on the sword to stretch his face, and the chic appearance of drunkenness in the world would surely make countless people fall over. So arrogant. Jian Wushuang shook his head and felt regretful. Elder Wind, what's next? Elder Moose Wind glared at him and snorted. Miss Shuang, don't you put the words of this seat in your ears? This seat thought you had hard wings, so you don't need the discipline of this seat. What are you doing now? Come and ask me how to refine the corpse. Jian Wushuang heard this, pretending to laugh. Elder Moose, you laughed. Where can I dare not accept your discipline? But I am always greedy and want the best of everything. Well, greed is not enough to swallow elephants. This sentence, I have told you several times. Elder Moose Wind shook his head, and then sighed softly. Well, if you try it. This seat will now teach you the method of corpse refining. Having said that, Elder Moose Wind flicked his fingers. A glaucoma suddenly burst out, and fell into the heart of Jian Wushuang's eyebrows. Immediately, a method of how to make corpses was opened in Jian Wushuang's mind. This method is not complicated or complicated. The most important thing is that through virtual force, you must first reach the divine corpse to make a painstaking connection, then input instructions to make it obedient, and finally refine it day and night to make it thoroughly keep it for your own use. Jian Wushuang turned around and sat down with his back to the elder wind, knees slowly closed, and his face was pensive. This corpse refining method is not very complicated for Jian Wushuang, but if you look at it briefly you can get through. But its biggest difficulty is that Jian Wushuang has no virtual power at all. The key to this set of corpse refining methods is also the most basic thing. That is, it is necessary to first refine the corpse, and then make a connection. You can only try with divine power. Jian Wu's eyes flashed for a while, and then he made a decision in his heart. Theoretically, divine power and imaginary power are both derived from an energy in the universe, which should not be a problem. Do it when you think of it. Jian Wushuang's hands blasted out, and a sudden force of magic, like a river flowing from his palm like a tide, penetrated into the body of Tai Luo Supreme. In a short time, the sword waist card of Jian Wushuang jumped, and a psychedelic power poured out. From the outsider's perspective, the magic power of Jian Wushuang suddenly became no different from the virtual force. Really go for refining? Elder Feng's brows jumped, and his face was chaotic. Shuang shuang, shuang shuang. This seat is waiting for you to have a gray nose, and a gray face is looking for this seat. Shaking his head, Elder Moose began to observe sword unparalleled. Laugh. Jian Wushuang's divine power, as soon as he entered the body of Tai Luo Supreme, felt an extremely powerful obsession. This obsession is like a hedgehog who is fully armed and does not allow anyone to invade. However, when Jian Wushuang's divine power touched Tai Luo Supreme's obsession, in a moment, the obsession collapsed. The call of the Supreme Lord in Jian Wushuang's mind disappeared, like a nerve that had been strained for a long time, and at this moment it finally broke off. Jian Wushuang understands that the former Tai Luo Supreme has been waiting for someone who is not in this universe to take away his corpse. He was so glorious in his lifetime that he never wanted to be a puppet in the hands of someone in another universe. He raised a line puppet to attack the native universe he was guarding. Now he's waiting. Jian Wushuang is the most suitable person for him, and the person he wants to wait for most. Jian Wushuang didn't say a word silently. At this moment, he finally realized something. How sad and how worthy of the martyrs who died in the extraterritorial battlefield to protect the universe. Refining was smoother than Jian Wushuang imagined. Without any obstacle at all, Jian Wushuang completed the refining step by step. In a short time, the dim and faint corpse of Tai Luo Supreme God began to gradually light up. What? Elder Moose Feng was shocked, his eyes widened, and his face flashed with dullness. This corpse has been refined by this boy. The elders of our 5 elders, together with the suzerain, are helpless corpses of gods, so they were easily refined by this boy. Elder Moose's mouth widened gradually to be able to put an egg, and the whole person was lost. Boom boom. A ray of golden light continued to shine from Taro's supreme corpse. Feet, hands. The next moment, a golden light suddenly shot from Tai Luo Supreme. Boom. An earth-shattering explosion spread, and the endless corpse gas rose into the sky, forming a billowing black cloud. Taro Supreme opened his eyes suddenly. However, in his eyes, there was nothing pleasing, a stiffness and numbness. Jian Wushuang tried to enter a command in Taro Supreme, and Taro Supreme raised his hand. Wow. Instantly, Tai Luo Supreme raised his right hand. Then, Jian Wushuang tried to make Tai Luo Supreme Corpse perform other complicated actions, and it suddenly became stiff and obscure. It seems that only continuous refinement can truly make Tai Luo's Supreme Corpse, such as arm instructions. There was a smile on the corner of Jian Wushuang's mouth. Still, his heart was overjoyed. Too extreme. This is undefeated in all battles. In the universe, it has won a great reputation, it has awe-inspiring universe, and it has swept across 9 days and 10 places. Such an existence at this moment was even refined by the sword unparalleled sword, and became a corpse under his control. It can be said that Jian Wushuang's strength, at this moment, has soared in general. And this is not the real ecstasy of Jian Wushuang. The reason for Jian Wushuang's real ecstasy is that he did not let Tai Luo Supreme fall into the hands of these aliens in the universe. To Tai Luo Supreme, Jian Wushuang is respected from the bottom of his heart. It can be said that Jian Wushuang has gone all the way to now, because the existence of Supreme Master Luo has helped him tremendously. Chapter 4474, Puff. With the instruction of Jian Wushuang, Tai Luo Supreme stepped out of the coffin, walked in the air, and landed behind Jian Wushuang, like a shadow following the shadow. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes and glanced at the glorious glance of Tai Luo Supreme. Miss Shuang, did you really refine him? Elder Moose's eyes widened and asked inconceivably. I guess it should be. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and replied. Elder Moose heard the news, and could not help but feel lost, and then gave a bitter laugh, shook his head and said, Is this the treatment of genius? I waited for the elder 5 elders, and the corpse that the master could not refine, in your hands. It was so easy to be refined. Miss Shuang, I will report to the suzerain later. Let's go. I will take you back to your dormitory now. It is good. Sword Wushuang nodded. Subsequently, Jian Wushuang followed behind the elder wind, and swept away toward the palace. Tai Luo Supreme returned to the coffin, and was held up by the sword unparalleled. Along the way, many practitioners of the refining gods who were sitting cross-legged on the ground practicing their cultivation, raised their eyes to see the elder wind elder, and sword Wushuang passing by in the air, and their eyes were full of surprise. Immediately, a murmur of discussions rang from the mouth of the disciples of Lien Shenzong. I heard that this time the introductory disciple selection, we have a talent that can be compared with the disciples of our ancestors, who practiced the divine sect. They were taken away by Elder Moose on the spot. But this person? It should be what I want. Elder Moose is really fond of him. I neglected a series of tedious steps, and took him to the coffin mountain to select the corpse. The coffin that was held behind this person, just now should have been picked by this person in the coffin hill. I never saw that coffin, and I don't know which corpse is inside. The discussion sounded, and everyone was a little curious. At this moment, an extremely experienced disciple of Shenzong, looking at the coffin raised behind Jian Wushuang, his pupils narrowed sharply, as if he found something, and screamed in shock. This is the first coffin placed on the top of the coffin hill. This corpse in the coffin can't be refined even by the Lord Sovereign, but was obtained by this person? When this remark came to an end, it suddenly felt like a stone stirred up 1,000 layers of waves. Almost all the disciples flashed an unbelievable color in their eyes, and their faces turned dull. Who does not know the legend of the coffin mountain and the refining deities? As a result, the news of Jian Wushuang refining the corpse of the first coffin sacrifice spread wildly, shaking with enthusiasm. Without both sides of the sword, they set foot on refining Shenzong, and became famous. The size of the refining Shenzong is far beyond the imagination of Jian Wushuang. It may seem like a mountain peak, but in fact, it is much larger than a few star fields. Fortunately, both Elder Moose Wind and Jian Wushuang Xiu are not low. Under the leadership of Elder Moose Wind, they soon arrived at the palace of Jian Wushuang. There it is a tall stone mountain. The architecture of the entire mountain is somewhat similar to a honeycomb. On the mountain wall, it is full of dense potty black caves. Elder Wind said, Miss Shuang, this is the place where ordinary disciples who practice Shenzong live and practice, also known as corpses. The corpses are full of power and vitality. They can help you practice and refine the corpses. There is also a great benefit to warming up the dead body. It seems that the elders of the Moose Wind and the Sword Unparalleled have been sensed, and many disciples of the refining gods have come out of the corpse hole. Their faces were pale, their eyes were empty, and the whole man was filled with a gloomy atmosphere. See Elder Wind 2. When these disciples saw that they were the elders of Moose Wind, they immediately saluted. You're welcome. Elder Moose Wind nodded slightly at them, and sent them back. Later, Elder Moose continued to say to Jian Wushuang, Let's go, I'll take you to the top of the mountain, and I remember that there are just a few top corpses in there. Having said that, Elder Moose raised his sword Wushuang, stepped on it, and disappeared in place. When it appeared again, it was already on the top of the mountain. There are not many corpses on the top of the mountain. There are only 9 corpses. They are not densely packed like the bottom of the mountain and the mountainside, but each corpse is at least 100 miles away, and it is unprecedentedly huge. A strong body of corpse seemed to have condensed into the essence, blowing his nose from the corpse hole. Jian Wushuang could not help but feel a little discomfort, and frowned. Seeing this, Elder Feng Feng nodded with satisfaction and smiled. Well, sword unparalleled, you go in. Remember, in the face of the corpse of God, do not have any insults. You should respect. They will the most trustworthy person in your world. Even the closest relative is still there. Finally, you have to take a rest for a few days these days. This seat is now going to report the situation like the suzerain. After this time, this seat will pick you up and meet the suzerain. After speaking, Shi Moran's sleeve robe waved and Shi Shiran went. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and walked towards the corpse hole step by step. The corpse hole looks simple, but in fact there is no other hole in it. When Jian Wushuang stepped in, he felt a strong void in corpse. There was a hall, a palace, a practice room, and so on. The candles made from the dragon grass are never extinguished, and the burning smoke can help people to rest in peace while practicing. Jian Wushuang did not rest in a hurry, but placed the coffin of Tai Luo Supreme respectfully and began to inspect the corpse hole inch by inch to see if there was a similar surveillance ban. After confirming everything, Jian Wu both breathed a sigh of relief, banged at the door, and cut off all his breath. At midnight, a round of demonized blood moons hung high in the sky, and the low roar of the corpse Xiaoya continued to be heard in Xianshan's corpse cave. It is located inside one of the 7 corpses on the top of Shiyan Mountain. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on a stone bed calmly thinking. The candles made from the scented dragon scent continued to melt and burn, and a hint of green smoke rose. Speaking of it, until now, he still hasn't fully figured out how he passed the test of the test bedrock yesterday and achieved an appalling qualification. Chapter 4475. Moon stars are rare and corpses roar. After a while of contemplation, Jian Wushuang spread his divine power again and found that no one was nearby, and gently pulled the token given by Zhou God from his waist with his right hand. This token can not only cover the breath of divine power on him, but also communicate with the of the universe across the universe and report the situation. Alas, I saw a ripple like a water mirror suddenly on the token. Immediately, I heard a mild and slightly worried voice. How are you, Jian Wushuang? Immediately, the lens was swiped up, and the face of Zhou God appeared in the water mirror. There is no change in his appearance, but there is more fatigue in his eyes. I do indeed need to guess and guess. This time, the of the universe must work hard. Going back to the of the universe, I have officially entered the refining God sect. Wu Jianshou stepped back a few steps and arched his hands toward the of the sky. Oh, have you entered the refining sect? God Zhou heard the words. His face flashed with a slight surprise and said, Before, the Ram Supreme returned to the old man and said that you went to participate in the selection of the refining deities. But it turned out that he couldn't care about you and had to escape first. The old man thought you had run away. Wu Jianshuang heard the words, could not help but grin, and shook his head. It's a long story. Immediately, Jian Wushuang spoke sharply and said, Master God, then it seems that the Ram Supreme is all right? The of the water in the token water mirror nodded and replied, Yes, the old man has made contact with the Ram Supreme and the Ice Supreme. Both of them have nothing to do and have escaped from the pursuit of the refining gods. Morocco Supreme? Escape from hunting? Wu Jianshuang heard a sneer in his heart. This guy didn't even come to participate in the selection of Shenzong. Why talk about escaping the hunt? He shook his head, and Jian Wushuang did not intend to explain this to the of the universe, but Shen asked, Master God of the universe, what about the Supreme Spirit Jade? Lingyu Supreme. After a moment of silence, the god of Wuzhou said, The old man tried to contact him many times, but unfortunately he didn't respond. I was afraid that he had been secretly executed by Lian Shenzong. Is that so? Wu Jianwushwang sighed slightly. Lingyu Supreme gave him a good impression, but he could not escape the magic palm of the refining god. Gu Jianwushwang speculated in his heart that I was afraid that it would not take long before he could see Linjia's Supreme corpse in the coffin. It is just that he has taken away Taro Supreme, and if he takes Lingyu Supreme again, they are all aliens, and will inevitably be suspected. After sighing for a while, Jian Wushuang revealed his recent situation to the gods of the universe and Pan. When the god of Zhou heard that Jian Wushuang saw Tai Luo Supreme in the coffin hill, Yun Qing's face always had a flash of anger. The jerk. The old man also suspected that, even if Tai Luo wasn't the emperor's opponent, he shouldn't have disappeared so quickly, leaving no traces of falling down. I didn't expect to be sold as a corpse and sold to refine Shinzong. Suddenly, when the god of Zhou heard that the supreme corpse of Tai Luo had been taken away by Jian Wushuang from the coffin, and the refining of the coffin, his face slowly eased. Looking at Jian Wushuang's eyes, he turned into satisfaction and comfort. Afterwards, the two talked a few more words. God Zhou instructed Jian Wushuang to take precautions while refining Shinzong. This is the most important thing. Second, let Jian Wushuang be able to protect himself without taking risks under the circumstances. Try to inquire about the virtual universe's combat deployment against their universe, and the people who previously attacked the universe, which side of the virtual universe belongs to it. Chapter 4476. Elder Godshin Sickle must die. It's just that it's difficult to kill him without knowing it, and can't make people doubt him. Wu Jian's eyes flickered, and after thinking for a long time, he could not think of any good way. Just this matter needs to be considered from a long-term perspective. You must not act recklessly, otherwise you will fail. You will be burned. Wu Jianshou shook his head and said. At the same time, he was slightly relieved in his heart. It was not a bad thing for Elder Shunxian to come to him just now. At least the swordsman now knew that there would be a pair of eyes watching him secretly, so that he would become more cautious in his actions. Alas, the candles in the corpse cave continued to burn, and blue smoke rose up. Wu Jian sat cross-legged, and began to continuously research the weakness, refining Tai Luo Supreme by the way. When he went to the corpse hole, Jian Wushuang knocked side by side, and asked the elder Shinxian to ask for a book on virtual force. The book detailedly analyzed the structure and analysis of virtual force. Virtual power, like divine power, is an energy between the universe. Essentially, there is no difference between virtual power and divine power, but they are both a means of exerting magical powers, but it is because the laws and rules of the two universes are different, resulting in their particle, atom, electron and proton structure. There are different changes. That is to say, as long as I can figure out the deepest structure of divine power, or virtual force, sort the particles, atoms, electrons and protons, and regroup the changes, I can convert the divine power into virtual power, or put virtual powers transformed into divine power. Yan Jian's eyes twinkled, thinking quickly in his mind. This is simple to say, but it is extremely difficult to operate in essence. The structural combinations contained in imaginary or divine power are at least billions of times, and the number of combinations they can disrupt again is an infinite number. This is like 100 million permuted numbers. If you want to constantly regroup them, it is best to match a perfect number. It requires effort, and is simply an impossible task. Even if I am supreme today, it can take 10 billion times to deduct in one thought, and it will take an extremely long time to get a correct result. Wu Jian's eyes were so bright that he began to think about the feasibility in his head. First of all, the first thing I need to understand is the structural components of virtual force. This requires a lot of effort and time to deduct. Secondly, I have to disrupt all these structural components, and then match the structural components of divine power. Only after the structural components of virtual power and divine power are fully understood, can they try to convert divine power into virtual power. It took me too long to go through the deductions one by one, and now I don't have this time to waste. This refining God Zhonggui is the top gate of the virtual universe. If you want to come to the gate, you should have a similar library. The existence of the cabinet. I might as well go to the library first, to find if there are books about the most primitive structural components of Suli. Yin Jianhui's eyes blinked, and he took a deep breath and stood up. The next moment, Jian Wushuang strode out of the corpse hole and swept away toward Shurian Mountain. Beneath Yanqian Mountain, a voluptuous woman with an enchanting body, wearing cool thin silk and a cat-eared foxtail, was walking out of the corpse hole. Finally broke through Samsung. This enchanting woman stretched her waist and stretched her body. A pair of long, white and straight legs were looming in the silk, combined with the laziness of her face. It was very moving and imaginative. Wow! Suddenly a flash of wind flashed, and the figure of Jian Wushuang appeared in front of her. Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head. A boring battle. Thank you very much. How do you call a girl? The stunned woman replied with a smile. Hee, you're welcome. You are later in the mists than me. Just call me Juicy, sure. Okay, I know. Wu Jianshuang nodded his head after hearing the words, and then asked the specific address of the library to the 9 Musk, stepped on it, and suddenly shot away. Jian Wushuang stepped into the air and quickly flew back to Shurian Mountain. Below Shurian Mountain, the enchanting woman named Jiushi was still there, and when she saw Jian Wushuang intact, she wondered, Miss Shuang, how are you all right? Have you not met that 5-pulse disciple? Jian Wushuang smiled at the words and replied casually, Meet them, but they didn't bother me. Ah, Master Wushuang, you're in luck. Jiushi nodded, and then deliberately raised his face and said, But Master Wushuang, you must not care. These 5-pulse disciples are not good masters. You are the only super qualified in our case now. Disciple, they will definitely come to you. Well, I see. Thank you. Jian Wushuang persevered a few words casually and didn't talk too much. He stepped on the ground with his right foot and suddenly rose into the sky, straight into the corpse hole on the top of the mountain. With a wave of his right hand, the enchantment at the entrance of the corpse cave suddenly started again, and Jian Wushuang stepped into the stone bed and sat down with his knees crossed. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang's divine power poured into the books and began to carefully read the information recorded in the books. In this book, only the approximate formation of virtual forces is recorded. As for the detailed and careful formation of the structure, Jian Wushuang still needs to constantly try to combine. But Rao is so for Jian Wushuang. It has been a great help. Before, he was like a headless fly, and even if he wanted to disrupt the structure of the divine power and reorder it, he couldn't help feeling it. But the appearance of this ancient book is tantamount to pointing him out. Let's start. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, slowly closed his eyes, and began to continue in his heart, repeatedly researching and deducing, disrupting the most primitive and original structure in the divine power, and turning it into virtual power. This is a huge project. 1 day has passed. 2 days have passed. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. In this half-month it was calm. No one disturbed Jian Wushuang's practice, which also made Jian Wushuang completely immersed in the transformation of divine power and power. The dragon's incense candle on the candlestick keeps burning green smoke and never goes out. 1 day after half a month. Found it. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes fiercely. His eyes were covered with bloodshot, but he was not half tired, but exulted to the extreme. The time of 15 days is usually as short as a breath for a practitioner, and it is short enough to be ignored. But for Jian Wushuang, the harvest of these 15 days is huge. For 15 days, Jian Wushuang deduced every minute and every second in his mind, and the effort involved in it could hardly be calculated. Fortunately, he finally found the most critical transition point between divine power and virtual power. Chapter 4479. For the current sword Wushuang, nothing is more important than transforming divine power into virtual power. As long as the divine power is transformed into a virtual power, he can not only find a way to completely hang off the spell power left by Willow, but also he can break through the middle extreme. He has stayed for too long in the elementary supreme realm. As long as he has not yet traveled to the extraterrestrial battlefield, he already has a chance to break through the medium supreme. And when he travels to the virtual universe, he can finally break through the medium supreme. Medium extreme for him is just a kick. It was just a breakthrough, but because of such and other things, it was delayed again and again, until after entering this virtual universe, it completely broke the path of Jian Wushuang's breakthrough. In this refining deities, there are many inconveniences to break through after all, and the breath will inevitably leak out. Once the breath is leaked out, it can be said that the calamity is coming. And if he transforms divine power into virtual power, all this naturally no longer needs to worry. As long as he converts divine power into virtual power, he can not only break through the supreme supremacy without worry, but also completely solve the worries of his worries. Even if he fights with others, he will not be exposed to the risks. Start now. Jian Wu's eyes flickered, and he extended his right hand. Suddenly, innumerable divine powers poured out from him, and turned into a divine orb. Change. Suddenly, the power at the very source of the divine power began to change quietly. Alas! Divine power orbs constantly twist and change, making a clicking sound like glass breaking. Ha! The next moment, the entire magic ball exploded. Did it fail? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes, but was not discouraged. But after taking a deep breath, the ball of divine power condensed in his hands again. Alas! Located in the deepest place of divine power, which cannot be seen with the naked eye, a trace of protons and electrons separated again, and then reorganized. Jian Wushuang held his breath, and stared at the divine power ball held in his palm. Click, click. The divine power twisted, and made a sound like glass breaking. This orb of divine power began to flicker, and seemed to be changing in the other direction. This made the sword unparalleled, and there was a rush of joy on his face. However, he hadn't waited for a smile to come out of his mouth. Ha! A blast came, and the whole magic ball was broken again. Did it fail again? Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. This time, instead of rushing to reunite the ball of divine power, he began to silently reflect on the changes. After a long while, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, and continued the experiment. Ha! Failure. Hey! Failure. This cycle continues until 3 more days have passed. A ball of divine power gathered together like the sun suddenly jumped, making a dull wave sound. The next moment, the Jinli ball trembled violently. Its breath began to move towards an unknown territory. Jian Wushuang stared at this magic ball. He could feel that he was far from successful, but only one step away. The surrounding space was madly compressed, and a tiny crack cracked open in the void. Boom! Suddenly a blast exploded. Endless smoke filled it. Jian Wushuang slammed his sleeves and spread the smoke away. The next moment, he saw the original golden divine ball, which had turned black. This is... Jian Wushuang's eyes soared by 3 inches in the eyes, and his unshakable face couldn't help but burst of excitement. He reached out and touched the magic ball. Virtual force. This is virtual force. Jian Wushuang laughed out loud. Succeeded. Finally succeeded. He spent countless mental deductions, calculated the structural arrangement of divine power and virtual power, and then continued experimenting. Finally, he started with the divine power from the source, and changed its structural mode to make it into virtual power. Then the next step is to transform all my divine power into virtual power. Jian Wu's eyes twinkled, thinking quickly in his mind. As long as the first step is completed, and a way to convert divine power into virtual power is found, then the divine power and virtual power will be transformed later. But it is just according to the original declaration and so on. Turn, Jian Wushuang whispered. In a moment, his whole body was as powerful as Wang Ruyang, and he changed as much as possible. Card. The structure changes instantly and reorganizes. Jian Wushuang's body was up and down. The breath began to change dramatically. After a while, it's done. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. Now he has transformed all the power of the body into virtual power. Even if at this moment he exerts his magical powers and fights with people, he can never see that there is a trace of half power in his body. Of course, this is not to say that Jian Wushuang has really become a dummy. His spirit, his source of life, still comes from the divine universe. The next step is to break through the middle extreme. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and never stopped doing anything. He planned to take this opportunity to break through the realm and rise to the highest level. Once he breaks through to the middle extreme, his strength will have a qualitative improvement. Miss Double. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to make a breakthrough, a sudden voice sounded outside the door of the corpse hole. Huh, Elder Wind Moose? Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow, and then waved to remove the enchantment at the door of the corpse hole. Standing up, Sword Wuxia swept to the door of the corpse hole. Elder Wind. Jian Wushuang saluted him slightly. Okay. Elder Moose nodded his head as a response, and then asked, Miss Shuang, how can you adapt in the past few days? I heard that you and the chief disciple in the vein of Banshan, the Angry Bear conflict? Jian Wushuang heard the words and couldn't help but mute this Moose Wind elder. Is the news so well informed? Nodded his head. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and said, Elder Huifeng's Moose Winds are just some minor contradictions that are harmless, so don't worry. Well, that's fine. Elder Moose Wind nodded his head and smiled. Miss Shuang, with your talent in the future, we must be the dragon-like figures of Shinzong in the sky. We do have to worry about those ordinary disciples. But when you break through the trace level, this seat will recommend it to the suzerain, so that you can become an elder in our suzerain. Thank you, Elder Moose. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. You don't need to be polite with this seat. Chapter 4480. Alas, Jian Wushuang followed behind Elder Feng of the Moose, and quickly swept towards the highest peak of Lian Shinzong Mountain Gate. There it is the place where the sovereign lord of refining God is located. According to Jian Wushuang's observations for more than 10 days, he can be considered to have clarified some of the strengths on the Ming side of Lianzong. Refining the emperor of the 8 sects of the sovereign, the 6 marked Su Shi, corresponding to the divine power universe, is the invincible supreme. Under the 8 sects of the Emperor Shinzong, there are 5 elders. The 5 elders have reached the level of 4 marks, even if they have the lowest cultivation. Under these 5 elders, there are nearly 20 ordinary traces of false men. This is the strength of the refining Shinzong on the bright side. If you compare it with the divine power universe, it's almost the same as the life shrine. But when you really count it, it's better than the life shrine. Because everyone who refines Shinzong, each person has a corpse that has the same strength as his own. So if converted, it is equivalent to double the number of false relics. In addition, Jian Wushuang's heart determined that there was definitely a more incredible power in this huge refining Shinzong. Jian Wushuang thought silently, and constantly compared the refining Shinzong with his own divine universe. Once the two universes are fully engaged in war, then the refining Shenzong will be afraid of a difficult bone. Led by Elder Moose Wind, the speed of both of them was fast. It didn't take long for them to swoop to the highest peak of Lian Shenzong. A palace formed by countless skeletons of Bai Sunsen appeared in the eyes of Elder Jian Wushuang and El Quind. Countless faint yellow ghost fires float in the void, shining like fireflies. Miss Shuang, Lord Sovereign is in it, go in with this seat. Elder Moose looked back and smiled at Jian Wushuang. It is good. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. From the moment he stepped on the gate of the palace, he could vaguely feel that in the darkness, a pair of eyes were watching him hidden in the darkness. If you guessed right, these eyes want to be the lord of the refining deities. If the divine power has not been converted into virtual power, perhaps Jian Wushuang will still be quite worried. But he has now figured out the nature of divine power and virtual power, and the conversion is successful. He is confident that even if he has a pair of fire eyes and golden eyes, it will definitely can't see through his identity. Crunch. The two black iron gates of the Sovereign's Hall automatically opened inward, and Elder Moose Wind and Jian Wushuang strode in. The first purpose was the elders and elders, standing on both sides of the hall, including the Elder Sickle. He saw Jian Wushuang walk into the hall, and suddenly there was a shadowy smile that was difficult to understand. At the top of the main hall, a majestic middle-aged man, wearing a very long black robe with the corners of his clothes scattered on the ground, with raised eyes, sat on the main seat. You don't need to guess. This person is bound to be the master of this sacred Dalian sect, the Eight Desolates. Sovereign, the mists are here. Elder Moose Wind arched his hand at him, and then stepped into the sides and returned to the position. Disciple Wushuang, see Lord Suzerain. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes, and immediately lowered his head, and said in a loud voice, "Look up and look at me." A low, majestic voice came from the mouth of the master of the refining god. Yes. Jian Wushuang looked up. I saw the Lianshan sovereign stare at him with staring eyes, no expression on one face, no emotions. A mountain-like pressure suddenly radiated from him, like a mountain, pressing on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang couldn't help sinking. Sure enough, as soon as this remark came to an end, before the refining monk spoke, he saw the elder Feng Emo stepped out, his face anxiously. Master Sovereign, this is absolutely necessary. Miss Shuang is our rare superb qualification for refining the Emperor Shenzong, and refining the first corpse in our case. The future is limitless. If the soul-searching technique is forcibly used, it is equivalent to breaking his promotion path. The Sovereign Lord suddenly snorted and said, Elder Moose Wind, the higher the talent, the greater the harm. The three people who appeared outside the Shanmen selection on that day, should you be clearer than the Sovereign? Wu Shuang's misconceptions are from the same place as those three people. Then the millions of years of our universe have been leaked and damaged. Can you afford this responsibility? After finishing speaking, the Lord of the Lianshan looked coldly at Xiang Jianwushuang and said, Miss Shuang, this matter is of great importance. There is no 1/10,000th risk, and it is blameless for the masters of this suzerain. The words fell, countless vain forces, and rallied in the hands of the master of the refining gods. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's heart sank to the extreme. Chapter 4481, Escape? At this moment, thousands of thoughts flashed wildly in Jian Wushuang's mind. It is absolutely impossible for him to perform the soul-searching technique. Once he is allowed to perform, the things from the divine universe will be fully exposed. Although he is now transforming divine power into virtual power, the soul-searching technique goes straight into time and traces the deepest memories. This point is how Jian Wushuang can change, and it is absolutely impossible to change. Instead of exposing and being killed after performing soul search, it's better to retreat now. For a moment, Jian Wushuang's face remained calm, but his heart began to think back. If the two original supernatural powers of the primitive universe and life shock are directly applied, coupled with the mysterious skills such as dragon blood mysticism, when the explosion erupts in an instant, they will be caught off guard. Go out. And he also has a card called Divine Power Breakdown, which can confuse magic. However, in this way, it is equivalent to all the previous actions of Jian Wushuang, all of which failed, and the supreme corpse of Tai Lua will not be taken away. Misty Double, come on. Just when the Sovereign Lord is about to prepare for the soul search, Elder Banshan, one of the 5 elder elders, flashed his eyes slightly and suddenly said, Sect Master, Moose Wind is right. This mist is a good seed for our refining Shinzong. With his talent, it will be inevitable in the future. Will be on an equal footing with me, if after the soul searching, he is indeed the same person who is out of the same place with the 3. If not, it is equivalent to us personally stifling the power of the future of our refining Shinzong. In this matter, I also ask Lord Suzerain to think twice. Jian Wushuang, who had already exploded far away, could not help but raise his eyebrows slightly and look towards the Elder Banshan. I saw the Elder Banshan nodded slightly towards him, and there was a flash of anomalous in the eyes that only the 2 sides of the sword could see. Okay. Jian Wushuang saw this, and could not help but tremble in his heart. Yeah, Lord Sovereign, can you test whether Wushuang and the 3 are from the same place? And there are more discernible ways. Why use the soul-searching technique? Elder Moose said quickly. The Lord of the Refining Gods heard that he could not help but flash a slight hesitation. It seemed to be thinking. After a while, the Lord of the Refining God nodded and said, Well, just as the elders said. Miss Shuang, let's do this. You will release the weak force, and let the suzerain watch. As soon as this remark was made, there was no expression on the other people's faces. But the elder sickle burst into a smirk. He had inquired that Jian Wushuang had not really used virtual force since entering the refined God sect. Included in the library, conflicts with disciples of the 4 pulses, and confrontation with the angry bear, the use of physical power. It can be deduced from this that this fog double definitely has some reasons why it is impossible or dare not use virtual force. However, after just a breath, the smile on Elder Shin Sickle's face instantly freezes on his face. How can this be? I saw in the hall, Sword Wushuang spread out 5 fingers, in his palm, a group of black condensed by force, is constantly breeding distortion. The virtual force in it is pure to the extreme. Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent, and he looked at the refining God Sovereign and said, Master Zong, do you think that's enough? In an instant, the expression of the Emperor of the Refining God sank down, and the Elder Wind of Elder Wind flashed an unexpected color of satisfaction. Before that, he helped the sword unparalleled sword to the Elder Banshan, and his eyes were a strange color. Seems to be quite surprised, Jian Wushuang released a weak force. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. There must be something weird in the middle. Just then Elder Shinxian screamed. He stared hard at Jian Wushuang, his face full of gloom. Jian Wushuang looked at him with a bland expression and said, Elder Shin Sickle, the disciples have offended you somehow. Since I was still participating in the introductory selection, you have been targeting me. The disciples remember that it seems that neither I nor you too many intersections? This soul-searching technique, I'm afraid you also suggested it to the Lord Sovereign? Elder God Sickle, my disciples are curious now. Is it why the disciples offended you? Or did I accidentally offend you? Interests that make you so hate me? As soon as this remark came to an end, the other elders seemed to be hindered by what they thought, and narrowed their eyes to look at Elder God Sickle's eyes, which became complicated. They could not help but think that the biological son of Elder Shinxian is now the chief disciple of the suzerain, and is now recognized as the first day of refining Shinzong. Before Jian Wushuang future refining Shinzong, the Elder Shinxian had proposed to the suzerain in the hall 3 or 5 times to have his son be appointed as the next suzerain of refining the suzerain. All of a sudden, thoughts flowed from the minds of many elders in the hall, and once this idea begins to take root in my mind, it will gradually sprout, grow stronger, and then go on. Miss Shuang, you talk nonsense. The Elder Sickle's face suddenly changed. He wanted to say more. Enough. Lian Shinzong Su looked at him coldly, and then looked at Jian Wushuang again expressionless. Miss Shuang, you are a descendant of Zongmen, You must not frame the elders without any evidence. After a pause, the Lord of the Refining God continued. Wu Shuang, that's all for this time. But after Zongmen Big Match, there is a task that you need to perform. You must not refuse. Do you understand? Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. Well, let's just go away. The sovereign lord regained his seat and closed his eyes. The 5 elders of the hall and the elders looked at each other and then resigned. Miss Shuang, let's go. Elder Moose patted Jian Wushuang's shoulder and smiled. It is good. Jian Wushuang left with the elder Wind Elder. Suddenly, the hall was quiet, and only Elder Shin Sickle left. He stared at Jian Wushuang's departed back, with extreme resentment in his eyes. Miss Shuang, you wait. Don't be too proud of yourself. This one will grab your feet sooner or later. The Elder Sickle rattled his teeth refining Shinzong. Jian Wushuang and the Moose Wind Elders fly in the air. God Sickle, it's getting too much. He thought that because he was a suzerain, even his disciples dare to bully? Elder Feng's face was particularly unsightly. Chapter 4482. This sickle is becoming more and more wanton. It seems that this is the time for this seat to find a chance to beat him. Elder Moose said. Jian Wushuang was thinking about the Elder Banshan too, and couldn't help but ask, Elder Mokfeng, what is the origin of this Elder Banshan? Is Banshan? After listening to the words, Elder Moose Feng thought for a moment, and then said, I don't know much about Elder Banshan. Although we are the elders of the 5 elder monks, Banshan has always been lonely, and we are extremely lonely. Deal less. Speaking of which, Elder Banshan has a longer history of refining Shinzong than me. It is said that before tens of thousands of chaos ages, the previous monarch returned from a remote forbidden area of the universe, and then Elder Banshan stayed in this refining Shinzong. There are tens of thousands of chaos periods, and no step has been taken. Speaking of Elder Banshan, the number of shots is also very small, but each shot is a thunder strike. I am afraid that it is not in this seat. Is that so? There was a flash of thought in Jian Wu's eyes, and for some reason there was a speculation in his heart. However, if this guess is correct, it will take time to verify. The two flew in the air while chatting, and soon reached the top of Shiyan Mountain, outside the corpse cave of Jian Wushuang. Wu Shuang, Zong and I will soon have a Zongman disciple comparison. Would you like to participate? If you do, I will leave a place for you. Elder Wind asked. Jian Wushuang thought for a while, shook his head and replied, No, the disciples have recently realized something. But I am afraid that the breakthrough will soon occur. The suzerain master will have a task to be given to the disciples later. The disciples want to take advantage of this time, to first prepare to ascend. A breakthrough. Elder Moose Wind immediately heard the words, and raised his palms and laughed. Okay, that's why it's important for you to break through the realm. As for this disciple, it's nothing more than a chance to show your strengths. Why do disciples have to compare themselves to prove themselves? After speaking, Elder Feng was afraid of disturbing Jian Wushuang's practice, and after a few more words he left with a smile. Jian Wushuang sighed a little as he looked at the back of Elder Moose. In this refining deities, his impression of this Elder Wind Elder is quite good. But the two are inherently hostile camps. I am afraid that they will inevitably face each other on the battlefield outside the territory. Shaking his head, Jian Wushuang no longer thought deeply, striding into the corpse hole. In the main hall today, it was really thrilling, and there was a little difference, and I was afraid that it would cause death. If it wasn't for the Elder Banshan suddenly speaking at the last minute, I'm afraid that at this moment, he is either already killed in the hand of the refining Shinzong, or he is currently on the way to be pursued. Banshan, 10,000 epics of chaos, returned by a former master from a remote forbidden zone. Rarely shot. Withdrawn by nature. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the stone bed. His eyes twinkled, and he kept pondering the description of Elder Mofeng's Elder Banshan. After a moment, Jian Wushuang shook his head. Even if his guess was true, he must not easily and recklessly recognize him before the Elder Banshan gave him a clear signal. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes, no longer thinking, and began to break through the middle extreme. Huh. In that moment, Jian Wushuang's whole body power was fully mobilized, like boiling water, and started to run frantically. In his body, there was a roar of bones like fried beans. Suck! Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and sucked, and suddenly the body seemed to turn into a huge vortex, swallowing a large amount of imaginary force, and then transformed like a rolling wave toward the barrier between the first and the middle supreme. A roaring explosion, like a thunderbolt on a sunny day, exploded in the corpse hole. In an instant, the entire Shurian mountain was aflash. This is still the situation where Jian Wushuang has set hundreds of suppressions. Otherwise, just fearing the impact just now, a huge shock wave will be formed, which will blow up the entire Shurian mountain. What happened? Who is breaking through? Suddenly, in Xianshan's densely packed corpses, countless disciples who were condensing the corpses, or devoted to spiritual practice, all changed their faces and looted out of the corpses. The top of the mountain. It's a corpse hole on the top of the mountain. Someone is breaking through. I remember the 7 corpses on the top of the mountain, where several chief disciples lived. I haven't heard of any major disciples who want to break through recently. No, not the chief disciple but Wu Shuang. Miss Shuang? Is that the one who has been rumored in Zhongnyi recently, and has superior qualifications? Nice. Some time ago, Wu Shuang was brought back to Zhong by Elder Moose Wind, and given him one of the 7 corpses on the top of the mountain. In the corpse hole of Jian Wushuang, there was another explosion. Suddenly, Xianshan shook even more intensely. I remember Wu Shuang seems to have only Samsung or 4-star strength, right? Why is his breakthrough so terrifying? Is this the superior qualification? Even the breakthrough is different from us. Want to be exceptional? Looking at it like this, I'm afraid it's not a breakthrough in a small realm. Well, I am afraid that when the fog double breaks through, the 5 chief disciples will not be able to sit still. I heard that some time ago, Jian Wushuang had a brief encounter with Angry Bears in Zhangshich. In one move, he defeated Angry Bears. In my opinion, there should be a good person who spreads the word through deliberate exaggeration. But it is also obvious from this that I am afraid that the strength of Wu Shuang is not weaker than those chief disciples. Well, Zhongman disciples are much better this time, and I don't know if Wu Shuang will participate, and what position will be impacted. A whispering voice came from the foot of Shurian Mountain, and many disciples of refining Shinzong looked at the location of the peak sword Wu Shuang in surprise, and immediately opened a discussion. The voluptuous woman, named 9 Musk, is extremely graceful and uneven, and here too, she widens her beautiful eyes looking at the position of Jian Wushuang. How long has this guy come to refining Shinzong, and will he break through? Rumble. At the top of the Lian Shinzong mountain, there was a rush of wind, and the wind was screaming wildly. Thunder continued to flash, reflecting the ghostly Lian Shinzong, bright as day. Swordless sat on the stone bed cross-legged. A powerful breath was released, and in his deity, an immense amount of divine power impacted the first barrier level and the last barrier level. If in the past, Jian Wushuang broke through, and he was also worried that the breath would leak out and be exposed by the power of the refining Shinzong. But now that he has turned all the divine power into virtual power, even if the refining suzerain came in person, he couldn't see the right or wrong. Like Wandao Jianzun, please collect. Wandao Jianzun green beans update the fastest. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.